Even though they look almost identical, colored pencils and pastel pencils are totally different. Many people confuse them, thinking they are the same thing, but in this video I will demonstrate that the two of them have some very major differences. A colored pencil is an art medium constructed of a narrow, pigmented core encased in a wooden cylindrical case. Unlike graphite and charcoal pencils, colored pencils' cores are wax or oil-based and contain various proportions of pigments, additives, and binding agents. Their lid is much harder and more tightly bound. Pastel pencils are wood-encased sticks of soft pastel. They are made of pure pigment with a binder which creates a more vibrant color. They are powdery and soft, the tip is prone to breakage a lot and can't handle a lot of pressure. Some people have allergies at pastel powder, so keep this in mind before choosing this art medium. Now let's compare a colored pencil and a pastel pencil from Faber-Castell. In Belgium, where I live, a Faber-Castell Polychromos colored pencil can be found for $1.95, which is almost $2. A Faber-Castell Peat pastel pencil is a bit cheaper, being around $1.80. What is layering? Layering is the process of adding one color over the other one. When layering with colored pencils, just barely touching the paper doesn't work. The pencil lid being very hard, it doesn't adhere very quickly to the surface of the paper, requiring more pressure to cover the texture of the paper. Of course, here it also depends on the paper used, some being smoother than the other ones, and the other way around. When using color pencil and creating layers, it's best to start with a very light layer and build up from there to the desired shading. Creating layers with pastel is a joy, especially the wrist will be the happiest as these pencils require very little pressure. As with the colored pencils, layering is very simple, but sometimes you have to use your finger or a blending tool between the layers to push the pigment into the surface of the paper, especially to avoid overloading the paper. Creating a gradient with color pencils takes more time and is a bit more difficult. Another thing to keep in mind is the possible appearance of a wax bloom between the transitions of the colors, making them look muddy. To create the smoothest transitions, try not to press too hard where the transition between the colors will take place to leave enough texture in the paper to combine the two colors. When it comes to creating a gradient in pastels, everything is a breeze and works like a charm. The whole process is very quick because the pastel is very malleable and easy to blend. I always use my pointer finger to blend the colors and create a smooth transition. The powdery property of pastel makes this gradient have an immaculate transition between the colors. Colored pencils can be burnished using several methods, including burnishing and solvent, which we are going to test in this video. Burnishing involves layering and blending until no paper tooth shows through the colored pencil layers. After all the colors are layered, the artist will burnish them using white or any light color depending on the desired effect. This process requires a lot of pressure on the pencil that can create wrist pain, so make sure you take some small breaks between to protect your hand joints. In most cases, it is used a colorless blender that is practically a normal pencil but without any pigment, so it is transparent. Its role is to push all the pigment of the pencil into the paper, leaving behind a smooth surface. This can also be done using a white pencil or a light color. Keep in mind, however, that by using a white pencil, you will also lighten up the colors on which you will apply the method. Blending using a solvent is a smart move if you want to shorten the whole process significantly because it is much more faster than burnishing. To apply solvent, you need a brush. The amount of solution should be very small, so when soaking the brush in the solvent, pay attention to how loaded the brush is. All you are going to do is to brush over the created pencil layers, which will turn into a watercolor-like pigment. A minus point of this method is its pungent smell, so I totally recommend checking the content of the package before to avoid unfortunate situations, many people being allergic to this product. Pastel pencils can be blended using fingers, soft tools and a blending stump. The most handy and cheapest way to blend pastel is using your own fingers. Before you get down to the job, make sure you don't have oily fingers or you may leave some marks behind. For more precision and control, I mostly use my ring finger as I can manage the pressure more easily. If you want even more pressure, you can press your ring finger using your middle finger, and to get more coverage, you can use more than one finger at the same time when blending. Although many of us often hear that these tools are mainly used when drawing in graphite or charcoal, they are also suitable when blending pastels. They push the pigment into the paper very well and don't leave much pastel residue behind. For a better result, I recommend using a higher pressure to make sure that the pastel isn't just collecting on the surface of the paper. This is a rather special and not very well known tool called soft tools. After applying the pastel, start making circular motions to evenly spread the pigment on the paper surface and repeat this movement until you notice that the original color of the paper is no longer visible, which is a sign that the paper's texture has been filled with pastel. The oil-based color pencils use vegetable oil as a binder and tend to be harder, they hold a sharp point and experience less breakage. They enable the artist to use many layers as they don't have the issue of wax plume. These pencils are often more expensive as a result. Wax-based color pencils are much softer and have a higher risk of breakage. The hardness of pastel pencils is the complete opposite of color pencils. In their case, you will encounter many moments when the tip of the pencil will break without you realizing it, in the most cases, when sharpening. The softness of pastels has many advantages, but when it comes to creating details, it can be compared to colored pencils being far superior in this area. Although you would think it will make sense for pastel pencils to be more vibrant than color pencils, it's quite the opposite. Of course, each of these two categories have more or less vibrant colors, but in general, colored pencil sets contain far more vibrant colors. Take this into consideration when deciding which of the two is right for you. Now let's talk about some sharpeners. The most famous and popular sharpener is the handheld one. The one I'm using now is very good quality and has two slots, one for sharpening the pencil in full and the other one to refine the tip. This type is the most common but has a very big disadvantage. Requiring the use of both hands without any support, the risk of breaking the tip of the pencil is higher because only by a wrong movement you have to sharpen all over again from the beginning, so it requires a lot of attention. The electric sharpener is a great invention. Unlike the handheld one or the manual sharpener, it does everything for you. All you have to do is to insert the pencil and witness the miracle. The advantage of using this type of sharpener is that you get a good result with a minimum of effort. The only drawback I can think of is its large size and that it's possible to be a bit expensive, but the one I use right now was purchased from AliExpress at a very low price, the result being great. A tool that you would surely never have thought about of being able to sharpen your pencil is the sandpaper. These pads are made specially for pencils. All you have to do is to hold the pencil and rub it on the sandpaper surface. Keep in mind to keep rotating it, otherwise you will sharpen only one side. You can apply this method until the tip is no longer sharpenable. Try to rub the pencil as much as possible on the middle of the sandpaper pad to avoid dropping the pencil pigment and spreading it everywhere. As you can see, the end result is a very sharp tip, perfect for fine details. Many will say that sharpening pastels is the most frustrating thing to do. Using a manual sharpener is the easiest and fastest way to sharpen them. All you have to do is to insert the pencil and twist the handle. At the end you will have a very sharp tip ready to create details. To avoid the sharpener's blade to blunt too early, use a graphite pencil from time to time. This will clean the blade and keep it sharp longer. The most common method is using an X-Acto knife plus a sandpaper pad. Be very careful when you choose this method. When it comes to something very sharp, it's not to be played with. With one hand hold the pencil and with the other one you gently begin to remove the wood from around the pencil lid. Don't press too hard to avoid breaking or cutting the tip. You can choose how much of the wood to remove, but the more exposed the lid is, the more fragile it becomes. As the tip still isn't quite as pointy as we would have liked, this is where the sandpaper pad comes in hand. This is a special tool for sharpening pencil lids, so in order for it to work, there must be no trace of the pencil wood around it. Holding the pencil very tightly, start carefully rubbing the tip against the sandpaper surface until it reaches the desired sharpness. A very popular eraser is the kneaded eraser, or also known as putty eraser. This is a great eraser because it can be modeled according to the preferences of each artist, being able to be used in large areas of a drawing as well as in small areas that require fine details. But how does it work? The pigment of the pencil will stick to the surface, leaving behind a clean trace named highlight. Another type of eraser is a pen type. It has a fine tip that helps create fine textures. The best on the market is the Tombow Mono Zero Eraser. A very important piece of advice from my own experience using this one is that you have to clean the tip after every usage, because it will lift a lot of pigment that risks to be transferred to another area of the drawing, leaving behind a very dark mark that is very hard to remove. Another tool that was invented to make our life easier as an artist is the electric eraser. It can work on batteries or it can be charged. One big disadvantage is that you can control the speed at which it rotates, and you don't have a lot of precision as it vibrates and reduces the stability of the hand. When it comes to pastel erasing, your best friend is a kneaded eraser. Using a normal eraser will do more harm than good, as it will damage the paper a lot, as the paper used for pastels is much different in texture than the one used for color pencils. To fix a mistake or erase something in the pastel drawing, tap a little bit with the kneaded eraser over the area. It will pick up the pastel pencil pigment like a magnet, leaving a clean area behind. The first and the most handy method to create a highlight with color pencils is to use a white pencil. It won't always be able to create an entirely white area, especially applied to a very dark color. It will only lighten the color considerably. The white pencil from Caran d'Ache Luminance is the most recommended for this purpose. Its creamy texture and opacity makes it the perfect candidate for this job. Using a pen eraser like the Tombow Mono Zero will guarantee a very strong white highlight. Make sure to clean the tip after each application if you don't want to mess up your drawing. This tool can be found in two types, with rectangular and round tip. If you only have a rectangular one, a tip from personal experience is to cut its tip into a V shape to create a sharp point for fine details. Press hard to remove as much of the pencil pigment as possible. It is said that the eyes reflect someone's soul, but I believe that the eyes in a drawing bring it to life. Or who doesn't like an animal with a wet nose that is adorable? For this, use a white gel pen. It has a very strong white pigment that can't be matched by the other types of erasers. Make sure you use a light fast one that will remain white for a long time. A white gel pen of poor quality will yellow in 5 or 10 years, taking all the life from the drawing. If you can't find it, use a small brush with a very good quality acrylic. The indenting tool is the perfect solution if you are an artist who is always stressed when it comes to drawing whiskers. This technique should be used before starting to add the pencil details, but be sure that the place chosen for the whiskers is the right one, because you can't go back. The trench in the paper can no longer be removed or covered. All that remains to be done is to draw as usual, without the stress of creating whiskers in the end. Those traces made in the texture of the paper will remain intact even after several color pencil layers applied. Using an X-Acto knife to create highlights is one of the fastest and cheapest methods. It scrapes off the layers created by the pencils, leaving behind the original color of the paper. In short, it's like putting some soil on a piece of concrete. If you keep digging, you will eventually end up at the concrete, which will remain intact. A very important thing to know for this technique is to be sure that enough layers have been added before using this method. It's very simple. If there's not enough pigment on the paper, this method won't work. A bonus tip, if the result is not white enough, is to use the white pencil over to amplify the highlight. For pastel pencil, I will use the kneaded eraser to demonstrate how to erase using this tool. I chose this specific tool because in the case of pastel, it's about the only one that works. Its ability to be modeled makes it ideal for small details, but as well as large details. Be sure to clean it before applications so you don't transfer the lifted pigment to another area of the drawing. With pastel, light colors can be added very easily on top of the dark ones and the other way around. This is why pastels are considered a very fast medium. But how do we clean the kneaded eraser? Simply start moving it around and mix it until it opens to color and there is no pigment left. What's the difference between these two types of pencils when it comes to details? When it comes to color pencils for details, the best are the oil-based ones. They are perfect for creating fine, small details. Having a hard tip makes it much harder to grind, keeping its sharp shape for a long time. Polychromos are, in my opinion, the best oil-based pencils. I've been using them for many years, and they are very good quality, being also light fast. Compared to color pencils, pastels can be used much more easily when it comes to details. A lot of pastel artists describe working with pastels like painting with pencils, so easily can they be blended and used. A big disadvantage of those pencils is that their tip is very fragile and can break at any time if you're not being careful. I've heard from other fellow artists who have tried pastel as well that they can't stand the sound made by the pastel pencil on the paper, which sounds kind of scratchy, but personally I find it very relaxing, kind of like ASMR, but with art materials. They also require minimal effort from the wrist, which is a great long-term benefit, as the typical problems of those who use color pencils a lot are not very often encountered in pastel work. Now we came to an end of the video. I really hope you enjoyed it and you've learned a lot from it. I am posting one time a week and normally graphite, color pencil or pastel related videos, so if you don't want to miss any of those, please hit that subscribe button and the bell button as well to be notified every time a video goes live, and I really hope I'm going to see you in the next one as well. Have a nice day. Bye guys!